So, Kit's been bugging me for a couple of weeks to chat about life and the brain. So I thought a pretty good way to do this is just to kind of talk about kind of hacking your brain, fundamentally getting to know who you are, um, what's going on with the world these days, how what it means to be human kind of applies to all the artificial intelligence that's out there, and it ties together the work that Kit does in the Gray Cell protocols, looking at counterintelligence, and it ties in a lot of what I do in my own writing when it comes to mixed mental arts. So, Kit, this is you've been chewing on something for a while. What was it you're looking to explore?
I'm actually just really distracted by the beard. I feel like it's gonna get me.
It it I feel the same way 90% of the time. It hit monument status about October last year, and now it's one of those things where it actually is got a legacy almost.
I feel like have you named it? I feel like you should name it.
No, no, there's no name, no name. It's just an extension of me.
I think that, eh, to kinda get into what we were talking about, and we've been going back and forth in chat with this for months, I think, at this point. The neurodivergent thing, which seems to be kind of a Venn diagram with cluster B, which seems to be a Venn diagram with females. And I have no problem calling out females, males, I don't really care. This isn't like a gender-based, I hate my own gender kind of deal, although I'm sure people will say that. But I'm really curious. Well, I was gonna say I'm curious why so many women buy into it, but honestly, I think men buy into it too, they just do it in a different way.
Well, so this opens up. This is where, in the explorations I've been doing recently, especially so it really actually kicked off writing Paradox, my first novel, which was, exploring AI and what it means to be human. Chat GPT had just exploded. I had this idea back actually in 2018 about, I call them the mechanists and the humanists, about, what it would take to upload the human brain. And so when you start digging into that, you start peeling back the layers of, okay, what is it? Is a brain just a brain? Is there a uniqueness between a female brain and a male brain? What is that? What isn't it? Because there's a lot of hyperbole about what we expect versus what it isn't. Um, but where it kind of goes to that Venn diagram that you're talking about, where you've got these overlapping cycles that go in it. So one of the things that I've been exploring recently a lot more is kind of the masculine and the feminine, and then I've got the matriarchy and the patriarchy. So I just recently wrote about kind of what the patriarchy is and isn't, and where that goes, kind of to your point, is humans have a shadow. There are shadow behaviors. There are absolutely toxic behaviors that exist. There are definitely ways of thinking, behaviors, just what goes on in this space that aren't conducive to a social culture. And they differ slightly between male and female. I mean, you could see this as well, like, well, I'll just give you a great example. You just posted the other day about your dog, your large breed guardian dog. And there's differences. Like I had a Anatolian Akbash blend. And, they're absolutely not a Labrador. They're absolutely not a beagle.
Right.
They are a completely different animal, but there's also a difference between the male large breed guardian dogs and the female large breed guardian dogs. So what
Yep.
we're talking about isn't something that is specific to humans. There are evolutionary adaptations that create behaviors, and I'll pause there for your thoughts on that.
No, I think and it's funny you say that because I have 2 males and a female LGDs, and then I have a German Shepherd inside, and the differences in all of their breeds is staggering. The differences between the genders is different. Wow, that may be the dumbest thing I've said all week. But point being
Their
is
sexes.
yes, thank you. Um, when when women get into the shadow, they have a certain type of, and you can see it all over Substack. We've been seeing kind of this explosion of midlife female reinventing themselves. By the way, here's my list of diagnoses. You don't see a whole lot of men, for instance, on Substack doing that, but you do see men doing wellness, fitness. Here's my model of masculinity. Here's what it looks like. And I too, I'm now a guru, and I will tell you how to come under my fold and become the greatest thing that you've ever been. And I don't think there's anything wrong, certainly, with self-improvement. I mean, we should all be highly invested in self-improvement.
Mhm.
But I question kind of, where is it coming from? What identity is the foundation of that? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, okay, so I recently wrote an article, called "The Two Rules of Life," and it tries to separate a couple things. The first rule is fundamentally survival of the fittest. Like, e evolution, nature basically says if your genome doesn't continue, it wasn't the fittest. Um, we can accept that. Now, what's interesting is people freak out when you get into this topic with humans because, like, "You're talking eugenics." I'm like, "No, I'm talking evolution of biology."
It's
Like,
the
let's
other
just
end of the
take it at the
spectrum.
macro
Yes.
level. We pollute our environment to the point that we kill all humans. Guess what? We're not the first species to have done that. We probably won't be the last species to have done that, but it's also nature doesn't give a shit. So, so the continuation of the genome is important, and so to do that, or let me go to the second rule because this is where we get so tangled in the first rule. The second rule is what I call soul maturation. We are here to grow and mature and mentor. Now, you and I we talked about this before on one of your podcasts. I will never get into a debate about which religion is right or wrong or whatever else. As
Mhm.
long as what you believe is helping you actually grow and mature, you're doing the second rule of life okay, right? But the second rule puts so many layers of moral language on top of that first layer. So fundamentally, to survive the first rule of evolution biology, men become optimized for something and women are optimized for something else. Well, men cannot create that offspring, and so you've got a more of a nurture function for the women who optimize for that. And so what men do then is optimize for resource, what I say is resource creation and management to make sure that the nurturing side of the equation, the yin and the yang, is properly supported with everything that goes with it. So the reason that lines up well with what you just said is that guru side of the female is about nurturing. You're curing, you're dealing with sickness, you're dealing with health or caring, right? It's that coddling maybe, the
Which
hugs,
has a negative connotation to it.
which well, I mean, so coddling in the let's just say in the best sense, right? So,
Okay.
my wife and I both coach mountain biking. Like, I'm the guy who goes and kicks the kids in the ass to go faster. My wife is the type who picks them up when they crash and gives them a hug. And it's much more acceptable for her to do that than for me to do that, and vice versa. Now, the men focusing on the fitness and everything else, that makes sense because they're the ones that are out there kind of leading going forward. So you're seeing a manifestation in that similar guru aspect of those inclinations, in my thought. Of
I think what you're almost describing is each party is protecting the orientation of the other. And by orientation, I don't necessarily mean the Boydian type. I'm more saying I'm facilitating an environment where you can do what you are best at doing. So, for instance, when it comes to my husband, for instance, I don't put gas in my own vehicle. I don't scrape windows in the winter. I don't shovel. I don't do a lot of those things. I'm not some kind of passenger princess. It's just he does those things for me. But in return, he has clean underwear. He has nice meals. He has a, a home to come home to, right? And so I'm not some trad wife, so to speak. It's just that's how it works for us. And because he does those things, I am free to do what I do. I am free to sit, in my office and play on my Substack. And he's free to work on the boat or work on this or do this or putter around in the garage because he knows he's not going to have to cook dinner in all probability. Now, it doesn't mean he never cooks dinner. It doesn't mean I never put gas in my car. Once a couple times a year, I do it. But you see what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
it's a symbiotic relationship, I guess, is what you're describing is I'm going to do these things, you're going to do your things. But I contrast that with when I was raising my son on my own and he was small, you get to be either the nurturer or the structure. You can't do both effectively. And so I think a lot of times single moms, for instance, will nurture because that's what we do. But that means there's less structure because you can't do both.
Right.
But in my case, I went all structure, less nurturing. And now it's a joke, right? It's a joke that I was more of a dad than a mom. And I also freely tell people my kid needed a little therapy when he got done getting raised by me because the emotional part wasn't there. The emotional connection wasn't as strong as, hey, this is the kind of person I expect you to be. These are the rules. This is, you know what I'm saying? And so you
Mhm.
can see that both things need to be there.
No, so there's this is interesting. I'm sharing a couple links right now because I voraciously try to connect people into the topics that that I've kind of explored before. So the first link I just dropped in the chat, and FYI, if anybody wants to ask questions in the chat, just please go ahead. I see we've got about a dozen people here. So the first link I dropped was the two rules for life, just as a background to what we were just describing there. It goes into a lot more detail and nuance on that one. And the second one is stereotyping properly. And so this is an interesting one. So stereotyping properly is interesting because it actually also what became a foundational element for my book Paradox. So kind of weaving together this idea, what does it mean to be human? So back to your point, what is a stereotype?
Oh man, we're going off the deep end today. I love it. Well, they don't occur in a vacuum, right? Like everyone talks about, well, don't stereotype, don't do this. Well, there is a reason why they happen. And because humans like categories, we like organized things, we like to be able to shortcut.
Well, so do your dogs.
Yeah.
I mean, your dog stereotype like hell.
Mm,
I mean, you this the classic story of the shelter dog who hates men or hates women because
my dogs don't
whatever
like
happened.
people with hats on.
It doesn't like people with hats on, whatever, right? They have this bias and it's really hard to deprogram that. But stereotypes and I would say stereotypes, I mean, that goes back to the George Box, all models are wrong, some are useful. Number one, we are cognitively limited. We can't and we're sensory limited. We are only getting a facsimile of the world, and we are only able to process. This goes back to Kahneman's thinking fast and thinking slow. So our fast thinking brain is that thing that allows you to profile. It applies we have 200 cognitive biases that deal with how, help our brain deal with too much information, not enough meaning, need to act fast, and knowing what to remember. So we're always applying this stuff because we have to sample. I mean, a great example is you're not hearing everything. You're hearing, like right now, there's a lot of sound going on around and you're only hearing what you're listening to intentionally. There's a lot of stuff going on. You can only see what you're specifically looking at. In fact, you actually have a pretty damn big blind spot that your brain flows in and closes with by being able to recreate things. It's just a nice sample for all these biases. So, okay, you've got biases, you've got heuristics, you've got profiles, you've got stereotypes. They're all the same thing. They're a shortcut to a pattern. So the way I describe a stereotype is it's the average observed mean of a population subset. Sounds technical. Basically, it says there's a grouping. Okay, they're useful. On the positive side, we call them social graces. We call it reading the room. You're considered like go back to the neurodivergent. Autistic people don't profile well, and so they're constantly lost in the social like just what's happening. You know, an autistic person comes up and they'll be like, "Hi, my name is, Mike. I am interested in, all these things." You're like, "Whoa, dude, read the room. We're not quite there yet, right?" Or I got into this debate about small talk. What's small talk? Small talk is feeling around the edges, finding out whether your preconceived profile is actually call it, go back to Boydian orientation, reorientation. You're feeling whether your initial orientation is correct. Okay, my kids play soccer or my kids mountain bike. That's a different profile to apply, and you're feeling it around. This one autistic I was talking to is like, well, I hate the small talk. It's just so irrelevant. Why can't we just talk about something interesting like turtles? I was like, I mean, you could,
I mean, I
but
like turtles, but
I like turtles, right? It's
"Hi,
like
my
the
name is
kid.
Kit. Can we talk about
Yeah,
turtles?"
can we
Yeah,
talk
that's
about
not
turtles?
really
Like,
how it should
sure,
go,
right?
right?
But we call that a lack of social graces because it's not reading the room. And even then, it might be an interesting conversation to have in the meantime. He's like, "Why do I care if your nephew plays soccer?" I'm like, "Well, because at least you found out that he has nephews and you found a vector to interject turtles." You can be like, but anyway, where I'm going with this, stereotypes. Back to the male and female, back to these things. What it means to be human. We can't process all the information, so we profile. But also, what's really interesting is we love to apply profiles to ourselves.
Oh,
I mean,
so look on any social media, all the little tests you can do, all the little, "What Disney princess are you?" Like,
w
people love that crap. It's crazy to me.
well, let me give you a real world example. Before I got on the, I was wearing a different shirt. I was like, okay, is that going to match the profile I want to project on this first live stream that we're doing? My background is intentionally curated to articulate a certain profile. Now I could change that. I could use a virtual background. I could do a lot of other things, right? I mean, even the beard. Like, I debated whether or not I was going to put in my Viking beard jewelry because I can have the embed, right? So there's all these different things that we look at that project an image, a profile, an opportunity, right? This was where you get into the Chad versus the Trad wife or da 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 da, right? We love to have our own identities, which is a profile. We're hacking profiles to get that identity. And we're also so wrapping this back to the conversation on the neurodivergence and the cluster Bs and all the other stuff as we're talking about this, right? Profiles are highly useful. Social graces, however, the problem where it falls apart with stereotypes is where, oh, Kit is a woman. Therefore, Kit can only be X, right? So now I know you're into counterintelligence, so I know we can talk for hours on that one. I know you do homesteading. And just in this conversation, you do homesteading. We could probably talk about large breed guarding dogs and goats for hours, right? I know you live in Montana, correct? Montana. So we could talk about the outdoors world, we could talk about hiking, we could talk about all these different things, right? So there's 3 profiles on there. Now, what are we probably not gonna be able to talk about? Like, maybe knitting, sewing, don't know if those are your passion hobbies, but I know we could talk about writing because we both write. So this is where the profiles work in there. Now, if I went in there and said, "Well, I have these arbitrary definitions of what it means to be a woman, and therefore I'm going to hold you accountable to all of those and force you into those." That's where the stereotypes have the negative inclination and they fall apart.
I think you just
Otherwise,
described my childhood.
right? Well, that's what we all chafe against, but otherwise they're incredibly important.
But let's take that further and go, okay, you have just done this intentional profile. I've done an intentional profile. I just moved one office into this office. So now behind me is piles and boxes and craziness. So that's my intention, right? Like, I don't want people to think I'm a slob. Why I told you about it then, I have no idea. But fake profiles, I'm going to adopt an identity because
Mhm.
I think that that identity brings with it social capital. It brings with it social proof. I'm this. I am this diagnosis. I mean, go on Instagram. It's crazy sauce. They're
Right.
putting like I have borderline, I have if you really want to go off the deep end, go and look at they call it DID now, dissociative identity, but it used to be called multiple personalities. I'm Sybil basically, and there's an entire community, and it's this, we've written about it, we've talked about it. It's this constant self-reinforcing echo chamber. And
Mhm.
anytime someone asks the slightest question, "Is this real? Are you really?" Oh, well, you don't need that kind of negativity in your life.
So this is where it gets really, this is I keep getting sucked into it. I started writing a little bit about neurodivergence. Actually, it started with, um, Karina. So Karina had this, was talking about, hating personality profiles, and actually, uh, um, um, Mark McGrath as well. I was on a live stream with him, and he was chafing against the personality profiles. And I was like, hold on a second. They're really useful because they help you understand normal, right? What is the healthy diversity of personality? There's right now neurotypical is this. It doesn't exist. Like, what is neurotypical? It's the other thing. It's the thing I'm not. Right? I'm
It's the
special. I'm divergent.
non-special people. Yes.
Right. It's just, if and I'm like, so you're I have never met a neurotypical person by most people's definition of neurotypicality, right? Um, but what happens though is when you stir up that pot, when you make all this mess, and as you talked about it, what was the term? The identity protective systems. Why don't you explain that one just a little bit more?
Well, so if I adopt an identity, regardless of what it is, I mean, if you wanted to pick a hot button, we'll pick neurodivergent. Well, I am this. Well, because I am this, I have now adopted this label. That is a membership card into a very special society, which, as I said, comes with social proof. It comes with currency that I
Mhm.
can use to buy status. And as long as I am protected in this system, nobody can say anything bad about me, and I refuse to broker any questions about it because my human value has been attached to it. It's no longer just like saying I'm a lawyer or I'm a counterintelligence analyst. It's you are talking about my soul, my brain, my
Mhm.
human value. And if you question that, you are questioning my validity as a human. And that
Yeah, right.
makes it an existential threat.
So you and I are both veterans. You were Air Force, I was Army. We worked with the veteran community. We work around the veteran community. You work, different. I work actually in a lot of DoD contracting, which has a ton of veterans. Most of us at work go by our call signs. And then because of heavy Air Force, and then I was Army, but worked extensively with the Air Force, so that's fun. But okay, let's do a microcosm and then pull it back to neurodivergency because the military has that similar sort of thing. I'm a veteran, right? And we used to laugh at people. We used to say they had their ERB, their enlisted record brief tattooed on their chest. They had their parachute wings and their combat infantry badge, and they had their rank on their arm, which they always had to get re-tattooed because their rank changed. They just their entire. I mean, they literally tatted their identity onto their body as an expression of their internalization of that identity. And so, but even within that, you talk about the proof of work, if you will, to borrow a different phrase. But we had posers, right? The people that were trying to project that thing. Like you could always smell out the person who washed out of basic training because they'll always tell you how they almost were in the army or something like that, right? And you know that they don't have the proof of work to get into the to that identity protective space. Now we did because we were vets and we were able to claim that. So that's a good example on a non that's not really a negative sense. That is a function of an identity protective system that protects the credibility and I would say the professionalism of a service.
Well, we could stay, if you wanted to stay in that community and take it one step further, you have the folks who, in November, they go to Applebee's and then they hit up Chili's, right? And they're
Well, because it's
wearing,
Veterans Day, you get
right,
breakfast, lunch, and dinner for free.
exactly. And it's not bad that if a business offers you a discount, it's not bad to take it, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not trashing that. But I'm going to wear my whole getup and then I'm going to hit up all of them. It is that constant, and it's not even about the free food, I would argue. I would argue that it's about the look at me, I'm telling you what my value is. You must
Mhm.
agree that the value is what I say it is.
now I'm gonna so this is what's interesting because it's a I think it's a great example because it's I mean, obviously, this is both an identity system we're in, and we both have our critique of it where, you're right. You see the person, they wear their, even spouses. Like, this was one of the horrible ones in the family readiness groups when we were deployed. They were Colonel so and so's wife. They weren't,
Right,
Jane Doe. They were,
right.
and they wore their spouse's rank as their identity as well. But so what's interesting is you see this identity protective system, you see the value because there is a value. We just talked about there's a value in the veteran status. There's a major value in some of the discounts or even recognition and things like that. Definitely a useful identity system to have. Now, where it gets interesting is in the disability side of the veteran thing. And this is where you start to see more and more people claiming like, um, well, so this is a I'm writing a co-authoring an essay with J.K. Lundblad, who writes a lot on libertarian type politics and things like that. But we're dealing with an identity protective system within the Veterans Administration because you can go from veteran, which is one thing, and then there's disabled veteran, which unlocks more benefits. And so, but the hard part is physical disability, my degenerating discs, my arthritis, my chronic nerve damage from jumping out of airplanes, from hucking rucksacks, from going through ranger school, from all that stuff. That gets me like 20%. Now, that actually affects my life. But if I wanted to get to 100%, I claim anxiety and depression related to my primary physical. Now, if I really want to say the magic words, PTSD. And so PTSD in the civilian context is known to be temporary. We all get it. Like, you get a bad car accident, your spouse dies, your child dies, whatever happens, there's layers of this PTSD and you can work your way through it. It's a natural human and animal response. Um, but when you make it part of your identity, you make it permanent, especially when it comes with a reward structure. And that's one of the bigger problems within the veteran community is you've got these people claiming to be broken, and they're actually making themselves broken because they to manifest the activity, to manifest the diagnosis, let's say, they have to internalize the problem. So they will create things. There's a fellow I know who had a negligent discharge. Basically, his buddy next to him discharged his weapon when he shouldn't have during a training. No one was at risk. No one got injured. No, it wasn't even close. This guy is claiming PTSD from that, and to claim that, he has to live it. To live it, he has to have excuses for why thunder and fireworks bother him now. To make that real, his brain has literally adapted itself to be terrified of those things. He has mentally manifest the PTSD from a non-event.
I wanna push back just slightly. So you have when you're talking about trauma, right? You have acute stress. That's the first 30 days after the event. That is expected. It's the same symptoms as PTSD, but it's not even been a month, right? And
Right.
that is the normal reaction. That's what happens. And if it doesn't happen, I start asking, like if a client comes in, for instance, to my office and tells me, well, I went through this and there's just this total flat affect and it's only been a week. I'm like, let's let's see if we can find some emotion because there should be some, right?
Hmm.
Now, past 30 days, now you're talking more of a post traumatic stress. But you're absolutely correct when you say that if you if you meld it into who you are and you're incentivized to do so, whether that be through labels that you could put on your Instagram profile, which like you and I and people in the chat might think of that as who cares about a label on an Instagram profile? You would be massively surprised to see how many people care very much. That is the huge thing for them. I could put this on my Instagram profile. Or like you say, VA disability, things like that. I know a guy who old Marine. He's probably in his late 60s, 70s now, although considering how old I am, I should probably stop referring to that as old. But he says, "Well, did you ever get your 5%?" Because I worked on the flight line. And I said, "5% for what?" He says, "Oh, for hearing damage, you can get the 5% easy. You got to at least go get that." No, that is disgusting to me. I don't
Mhm.
need that.
Right.
Um, but that mentality, it and if you were to talk to him, like when I first met him a couple years ago, he told me within the first 10 seconds of meeting him,
What his
"My
disability
name's
rating was.
John. I'm a disabled veteran."
Right. Well, so, uh, yeah, I dropped another link in the chat about PTSD in the brain, or wrote years ago as well, but, because it does part of it is the way the brain wires itself. So, to your point about so this is interesting. I'm gonna segue, and then I'm gonna come back to that identity, then I wanna go back to the neurodivergence, so bear with me while I thread this. So, your brain doesn't remember things like a movie, or very few brains think of things like a movie. So, why don't you have any memories before really fundamentally before, like, 6 years old? I mean, you have little glitches, right? But really no memories because your brain is more understanding, like, okay, the phone, red, rectangular, shiny, light. There's all these different attributes that you build on. Now, I can pull something else. Let's see if I have something. Oh, funny, I have an old guide on that I found in my stuff. Okay, again, red, white, this is actually, 30 ACR, the howitzer battery, but fabric, soft, these different attributes. And so what we're doing is we're creating this library of attributes. So balls can be round, balls are round, some can be smooth, some can be rough, some can be this, can et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we start building these different samples. That's why kids constantly they see a ball and they'll touch it and they'll feel it because each ball is slightly different. You're building this library. Now think of those as data points. So your memories are actually saying, recreating something that says, red, car, tires, crash, pain, this. And
Association.
so, right, the association through those. So when you think about it, if you sit there and you close your eyes and you think about now just recreating your face, I'm going to say, okay, okay, female, we're going to talk about the short hair. We're going to talk about different attributes. We're going to put together, is it your face? Well, I don't have a photographic memory, so no, it's not. It's a description that I could kind of put together. So this is what the forensic artists do all the time, right? They're trying to figure out based on patterns how to put that face back together. What PTSD does is it creates a massive um, neurological connection, both physical and also hormonal, that connects two systems. So your endocrine system gets overloaded, and so it's classic examples: garbage bags on the side of the road or IEDs. It takes a little bit to temper that one back down. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Back to that fellow I talked about, is you can also build them stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. The goal is to weave them back off to a normal spot, but you can build it. So he took an innocuous connection and built it into a major connection, connecting all the different things that go with it, manifesting in a way, a disability. Um, Now, going back to the identity protective systems, when you create a system that says, I'm a disabled veteran, do you have any incentive to get better?
No, it's just like the breast cancer nonprofits that make millions of dollars for their officers in their, quote unquote charity. They are
Solomon
absolutely
B.
never going
Pullman
to find a cure.
Foundation
Yeah, they're never gonna find a
stopped
cure.
investing in once they started seeing benefits in their research investment into cancer. There was a big scandal about 10 years ago. They actually stopped investing in that research. They started investing in other research. They had no incentive to actually cure cancer.
I think to kind of even, I don't wanna say dumb it down, but make it just really relatable, the way that I explain it is your brain has a file cabinet, and when something happens, your brain runs to the file cabinet and says, "Hey, I have a file for this. This has happened before. I know how to handle it. This is what's gonna happen." And because, what PTSD does is attaches a whole bunch of stuff to this file so that even if it's just tangentially related, can't even talk today, um, the brain goes, "Oh, oh, we know how to
Well,
handle
that's
this.
that so that goes back to Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast.
Mhm.
It's an association, it's a heuristic, it's a profile, it's useful, right? This is where the profiles become really interesting is overreacting to a bird in the bush is better than underreacting to a lion in the bush. So, I could always be wrong about the bird, but that might make me right about the lion later.
Right. It's I mean,
So
it's
there's
overcompensation for a good reason.
right, there's a legit reason. Now, I wanna weave in something here because when we talk about profiles, something we've overlooked is in your counterintelligence, what are you doing?
Profile.
You're profiling the shit out of people, right? And you're also showing how profiles fail, how the gregarious person, this and that can obfuscate an actual negative shadow profile. Um, so let's weave this back into the neurodivergence and the cluster B, the neurodivergence in the women, right? Okay, so you've got 3 major clusters or 3 major, groupings of profiles, right? So women have a more in general, have a more of a nurturing function. They also use soft power dynamics. This is something that, Hannah, oh, why am I drawing a blank on her last name? Spear and, Natalie,
Oh, Martina.
I'm sorry?
Natalie Martinek, is that her name?
Yeah, Martinek, even, so there's a lot of, and Andrew writes about this all the time about the soft power dynamics within femininity. Men will just punch it out, women will gossip it out, I guess, if
Yeah,
you wanna talk.
we'll passive aggressive it,
We'll
and
just yeah, we'll just
I
we'll
have to
just,
say we 'cause I'm a female, but I find those
yeah,
dynamics pretty
it's
disgusting.
well, it's also because there's not the overt you've got so, let me flip the script again on this one. I had this conversation with my mom a while back. She's like, "Oh, you shouldn't gossip about people." I'm like, "Actually, gossip" I actually have a draft on this one, I haven't dusted off in years. Gossip is a very, very powerful and very useful tool. It allows feedback to be provided before it goes covert feedback versus overt feedback. You get this feeling about what people now, the person may be wrong, but you realize, "Ooh, Kit's watching me." Kit thinks, though, that when I stopped off at June's house, we're having an affair, and that's watching. But what else is Kit watching? Kit is watching anybody else who walks down that street. My mom talks about it all the time. They live in this 55 plus community now, and they're all like, "Oh my god, these specific ladies watch everything." Yeah, but they're watching everything, right? So there's a positive and a negative that goes with that. But also, my parents overreacted. They're like, the so and so thinks that my dad's having this affair because they're friends. Okay, don't overreact where you can't ever be seen, but also it does keep you honest. Somebody's watching you. The probability that you're gonna get away with an actual affair goes down because you know that that gossip network actually exists. So it's also a way to express, uh, potential correction and or guidelines and or bracketing behavior expectations without having to have overt, like, laws or enforcement or all the other things that men typically do. You don't have to get there because you've got this other structure that bounds it.
I'm gonna wanna sit with that one a second. I wanna come to back to that because and maybe it goes back to the definition that we use, right? Because maybe my definition is different. I view gossip as it's a nasty thing. It's something that you do for the purposes of harm.
It can be.
Or if you and maybe you're not thinking, "You know what? I wanna ruin this person's life." Maybe it's, "I want to have some social currency. I wanna foster rapport with you, so I'm going to give you a piece of information about a mutual enemy." And so it's always
O
a
or I've observed something, I'm confirming whether you see the same observation. So let's just take so this is where this is so what you're identifying is a great example of a behavior.
Mhm.
Let's just call it subtle transference of information, observed information.
Okay.
Okay. Now I can I can use it I can use that information and share it, and it helps people. You find out that somebody's cheating on you, right? Or I could use it to weaponize, and I destroy a relationship because I inject doubt, right? And even if it's accurate or not accurate or known or not known, right? There's different levels where it's the shadow versus it's the light side versus the dark side. It's Gaia versus a devouring mother. It's a tyrant versus a good king. It's the what Jung will call the shadow, the shadow inclinations. So the nature of the event is one thing, and the use of it, or the weaponization, or the manipulation, or the general positive side is the other.
Okay, so basically see, that ties into something I say all the time, that manipulation is neutral. It goes back to intent. Now, on the other side of that is intent doesn't matter if the effect is the same. You can do I guess what I'm trying to say is you can do the wrong thing for the right reasons, and it will still have bad effects, and at
Okay,
that point, your intent doesn't matter.
okay. Now that's yes.
So if I think that I saw you at June's house, or if I know I saw you at June's house, and I go to your wife because I'm a transparent person and I say, "Hey, he was over at June's house," and she didn't know, but maybe you had a perfectly good reason for being there, and I have now injected. It doesn't matter if I was trying to be transparent. It doesn't matter if I was trying to be good, if I was trying to help your wife, because I just dumped kerosene on a lighter.
Well, so okay, this is where it gets okay. We're gonna this is a whole different essay topic on its own right, but
We're also getting
also
in the weeds.
there's the transmission, but there's also the receipt, right? There's different ways to take it. Where I could immediately suspect the worst possible outcome versus the best possible outcome. Now, what's interesting is that can also be weaponized. The person whose husband has cheated on them for 20 years, everybody knew it. They kind of dropped hints all the time, and she just blithely took the most, what do you call it? Uh,
Innocent.
Positive out
Yeah.
potential, and then finally realizes that, "No, actually, he's been cheating on me for 20 years," versus the person who's like, "Oh," ready to burn the whole place down because something to be suspect. So, where I'm
Those
going
are the
with this
layers, though.
mm, yeah, Chuck, somebody should write a novel about that. Um, yeah, that's kind of the ending of Paradox, where we just burn the whole place to the ground. Um It's all the layers. So this is where the management of that one is so important. This is where understanding your brain. So let's get back to the kind of the hack your brain, and then kind of let's weave this back into that cluster B stuff. So when you start to understand, first off, what's going on, like we've talked about a lot of different things. Fundamentally, we're talking about biases, heuristics, and transference of information. So when you can sit there and understand, like, okay, you saw me at June's. Okay, there's a bias, there's an observation, there's something going on. There's also there's other information that goes into this. Goes back to, John Boyd, his OODA, not loop, but OODA process has the reorientation. Orient, reorient, reorient, reorient. Make sure this is something that in Polymathic Being, and the Polymathic mindset, I talk about insatiable curiosity. You're always looking for new information. Humility to say, I'm probably wrong about that first observation, and intentional reframing. Reorient, reorient, reorient. Pretty soon you're going to find something that's undeniable, but by understanding all of these mechanisms that we're talking about, the biases, the heuristics, the stereotypes, the identity, protective systems, which again, you're applying a profile and you're using these other things as currency to kind of enforce your position within that. The soft power or covert power versus overt power as you get in here. That's all what's going on in your brain as you start to process it. Now, when you can start to have that conversation, okay, is this a covert power move, an overt power move? Is this an identity protector system? Is this a profile that if I lose this profile, do I lose a function of my identity? Yeah, I play this game all, what then? What if I weren't a disabled veteran? What would happen in that sense? Well, okay, I don't
Who would
associate
I
with it.
be?
I don't lose anything.
Right.
Okay. I mean, now there's a couple things like, okay, you know, what really matters? Is it veteran? No, it's probably the fact that was an Army Ranger. Now that's a pretty powerful, but that also comes with, that's not even an identity protector system. That's a status marker of a very, it's similar to like being a Ironman triathlete, let's say,
It's an
or
earned
an,
status, which
or
is
an Olympian.
different.
It's an actually an earned
Yes.
status. It's not something I have to defend
Right.
because it's already done. Now, if I use it as an excuse, like, oh, I can't, blah, 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 Army Ranger, you're going to be like, jump off the cliff, right? I have to continue to, I do have to kind of continue to maintain credibility on that one. Okay. But if you lose the identity, do you lose who you are? That's an important thing to start looking. Okay. So let's go back to where the entry to the conversation. So what we're seeing, and I have an essay that I probably will drop next week, but it's on, it's called Masking is Neurodivergent. And what you and I found as we started investigating this, so we wrote True Neurodiversity together, looking at what's using profiles, what is actually neurotypical, which is much bigger than most people would like to believe, and very much more diverse, which is important because we all love diversity, but unless it's, you know, we want to just, yeah, blast that away. Anyway, so what is healthy, normal, diverse behavior? That's important to understand because what happens when you blow out these profiles and these mechanisms and everything else, you get a lot of shadow behaviors that can hide in there. And that's what you and I started finding in spades. These people, again, it's very heavily women, very heavily middle age. We're talking 40 to 65, very heavily into the identity protective systems. Like in the essay that you'll drop, you'll see these names. Let me see if I can just bring up the draft. It's actually kind of crazy because, well, how many people put these in their name itself? Where did I put them? Let me just pop up the draft. Um, this is one where I always laugh. One of my biases is I absolutely hate when people everybody puts their acronyms after the name. Kind of drives me nuts. But okay, here's these are actual titles of people's profiles. Neurodivergent rebel, the neurodivergent uprising, the neurodivergent geek girl, the neurodivergent journals, Genie G ADHD, and the neurodivergent mama. Okay, that's the gifted experience. I mean, these are actual identities that people have written into their profile names. They're not comfortable like that. They are very protective of that identity right there. But what we're also finding in there is it allows them to hide a lot of what comes out as cluster B, the narcissistic, the antisocial, the histrionic, these different behaviors that go in there get to be clustered because what they're doing is they're taking an actual pathology, an actual disability to where well, Mark McGrath's partner, Sarah, her tagline is Sarah, profound autism mom. Now she has her own identity, but she has to designate her children who 20 years ago would have been autistic as profound autism because autism has been blown out to be virtually meaningless, which also, as we explored in True Neurodivergency, it gives you the excuse to not actually improve yourself. You get to lean in. And this is where I think it gets really, we talked about the veteran who claimed PTSD and manifest PTSD because he had to prove his claim. What I think you're starting to see in the neurodivergent space is people taking on bipolar and ADHD and this and this and this and this, and actually manifesting an actual problem because they have to identify it with it so much. They stop actually maturing their brain to overcome some of these cognitive issues.
It's like a very twisted version of fake it till you make it, right? Because and I have a very close friend and I don't feel bad saying this about her because I've said it to her face a million times. I'm an extremely I am 5 minutes to 15 minutes early for every single thing. I will be early to my own funeral. She is not. But it's always said, "Well, I have ADHD." And you see this a lot. If you really dig into the substacks that you mentioned, you'll see people saying, I have X behavior, or Y is my toxic trait, but it's because I have XYZ. And
Right.
so what's happening is people are using the labels and adopting it's like a cover for behavior. I don't have to change my behavior. I don't have to grow. I don't have to become anything more than what I am right now. And if you don't like it, well, you must be prejudiced against people with my label. And again, it's now I've attached, when I say things like that, and I talk about this in identity protective systems, I have now moral, I've attached morality to it. If you were a good person, Michael, you would understand that I can't engage in normal adult behaviors. I can't be a productive member of society because I have this disability. Oh, by the way, it's also a superpower.
Well, yeah, I'm actually, if you don't mind, I'm gonna read a paragraph from the
Yeah.
draft. So, this is where we find the cognitive ecologist, her real name Cher, wearing this mask, the mask of neurodivergence, so well as she laments feeling excluded from everything. Unlike Eva, who's another one you and I have talked about, the cluster B is much more obvious as she blames everyone else. The catch is her behaviors are a poison that our long evolved social systems were designed to exclude because they're a pathology, not some cute cognitive quirk. And then in a conversation, another substacker, Mike Hind, noted that her rant reads as deeply aggrieved, entitled, and antisocial, while trying to say it's a superpower being held back by the neurotypical. She's right that it's being held back, and she's wrong that it's a superpower, at least in the protagonist sense.
I think, well, obviously, you can't have a superpower that is also a disability. Like, that's just crazy. But it's I'm going to engage in behaviors that by default exclude me from typical society. And then I'm going to complain that I'm being excluded from typical society because and this is where you kind of get into almost an adversarial position, but they don't want inclusion. They want
No.
elevation.
It's and actually I hit on this one as well. There's another fellow, and I'm gonna jump back here. I think it's really important is so this is so I said the perverse result of the cluster B infiltration is the exclusion of truly autistic and ADHD people who need the attention and resources to lead more productive lives. Let me put it this way. I've never met somebody we actually have in the mountain biking there's a not sizable but a good number of people who are actually autistic. You know what they don't want? They don't want to be they want to be like they want to be with everybody. And when you include them, God, they're the best people in the world. And the same with the ADHD. They want, but they need attention, and they need resources to lead more productive lives. As more people try to gain influence, accommodation, and disability compensation, we see the explosion of pathologizing personality and the subsequent siphoning of funds and resources from those who need them most. There's another Substacker, Fell Choice. He had a note recently at the community level where I'm involved as the parent of a desperately disabled adult. Notice he has to append not just disabled adult, desperately disabled. He says neurodivergence is about providing a huge share of state money to people who don't need it. Um, he goes on to say, lady, I don't want to say your kids aren't neurodivergent. They're slow. They can learn enough to get by. They can work slow jobs with other slow people and have a great slow life. I know you want them off your hands and you picture the state putting them in a country club for the rest of their lives, but that's not the disability that he's dealing with. And it just draws the funds away from the people who actually need it. But we're not even talking that level of disability yet. We're talking masking as divergent, but masking pathology as neurodivergent, which is it's ironically the most cluster B pathological behavior you can do. But all of this conversation without the understanding of the profiles, without understanding healthy. This is going wrapping all the way back to these profiles, right? Why do I find personality proclivity so important? Because no, you're probably not ADHD, this. You're probably just an introvert who's a sensor, who is a feeler or a thinker, and who is possibly a little bit more disordered or perceiver. You're an
And nothing
ISF.
about that is bad or
And
wrong
nothing,
or
nothing,
abnormal.
nothing about that. That's an incredibly healthy thing. And you know what? We need those people. Like I'm an ENTJ. I need ISFPs. I need somebody who is an opposite inclination to me to backfill the things I'm not great at. I love big thinking. I love these things. I love actually getting into the weeds, but I love people who can go way deep and then I can pull them back out and we can connect that together. We need that diversity. That's not a pathology. The pathology is what keeps blowing these systems apart, trying to hide and then trying to claim and then trying to mask under pathology actual well trying to how would you trying to claim mask under disability true pathology.
When we were talking about layers earlier, and there's layers to this as well, right? Um, but if we go back to you and June, this fake affair you're having,
Yes, I mean I do know a June, but yeah.
well, that's awkward. So they, but you have the layers, right? And we talked about like 2, 3 of the layers. But now let's add more layers where I'm coming into this and I'm thinking, okay, I want to break up Michael's marriage. Or so there's another layer. There's another layer where I maybe have been cheated on in the past, and therefore I am viewing something with the orientation that is different than what your wife will view it.
Hmm.
There's another layer. Maybe I know your wife well enough to know what her orientation is, to know what her trauma lens is, and I'm going to use it. I'm basically saying, I know how your prism runs, so I'm going to
Hmm.
shine some light on it because I know exactly what's going to come out of it. That's weaponizing. That's a totally different layer. And so you have all of these layers, and this is true for every human interaction we have. There are so many different levels, and I don't want to call it a game because it's obviously not a game, but it gets played like a game. And the reason I brought all that up is because when you bring it back to this and this lack of accountability, that is the game. That is the core rule of the game that they are playing. I
Right.
don't want to be accountable for my poor behavior, and I don't want to get any good
Oh,
behavior.
okay, so I'm glad you went there. So I figure so I need to let's kind of put a wrap on that and let's tie this all together because I think you hit a really good point. And so okay, talk about there's the positive and the negative, right? There's the shadow. There's the and we all have it, right? There's always the shadow. So much of what we try to do, like what is the hero's journey? The hero's journey is literally dying to your ego, going from an I ego to an us ego. It's part of the soul maturation. Rule number 2 in the 2 rules of life, which if you're joined later, there's if you go up in the chat, there's a link for the 2 rules of life if you want to read up on that one. Um, that soul maturation, you have to die to the I ego and you have to be reborn to the us ego. And then what's interesting is there's a twist. There's another essay I wrote on the heroine's journey. But the dying to yourself is the hero's journey. The feminine heroine's journey is actually a redemption. It's a redemption arc, not the death arc. The feminine hero's journey is actually a little bit different, but they do the I to us through redemption versus the man is a little bit different in that one. Fun analysis because that kind of ties back to the masculine versus feminine, the matriarchy, the patriarchy, why they differ slightly. But where you're going with it is accountability. Second rule of life is that accountability. You have to grow and you have to mature. Children are infinitely selfish. I mean, my kids are young teens. My eldest is 13, and we have these conversations like you don't have to choose to be mean. Like going back to your point, you can be right and still be wrong because it wasn't delivered correctly, right? Um, and so trying to understand like that the conversations about being nice, be working together, not being the manipulation, right? Stepping away from the dark behaviors. One of the challenges I see with the masking as neurodivergence is it's almost the relishing delight of those shadow behaviors and then trying to cloak it with everything else. To your point, there's no accountability to mature the soul from an I ego to an us ego. There's only all of this noise in the system. So, kind of, what are your thoughts on that one? Before I have a
I
wrap to
think
put on this.
I think that the lack of accountability, the shadow traits that people engage in, it's literally so that they can be we'd call it in addiction circles king baby, where you are almost infantile in your behaviors, in your selfishness, in your need to have the world revolve around you, because for an infant the world does revolve around them, right?
Right.
Rightfully so. But you're also the king of your own domain. And therefore, you want to make all of the decisions while also being catered to. But those two things together make extremely toxic environments, because now if I'm king baby, I'm saying you will give me everything that I want, and you will do it in the way in which I demand, and you will like it. It's not enough. And that goes back into, how we've redefined tolerance over the years. It's not, I don't like it, but I accept that it exists. No, you must be absolutely all in. You must
Yeah.
love it.
It's baby kings, it's tyrants. And I think and what you just described, so this is the good king or the tyrant are the positive and the negative of the masculine. Gaia, the good mother, and the devouring mother are the negative and or the positive and the negative of the feminine. And what you see though, because it's not stupid, it's not binary, right? Because to your point, you can be the good mother, good king of your own domain. That's the best of both worlds, right? But you also have that inclination. But the whole point here is, or for me is, it's not it's not where you start, it's where you end. Because we're all on different adventures, we're all in different growths, and the whole point is, in hacking your brain is to understand how we're working, where we're at, how do we get better? And this is where these profiles, I think, come in so useful, because we now have a language that we can use to start to describe whether this behavior is working or not. And going back, I think the main point is, are we holding ourselves accountable to doing things better? Are we holding ourselves accountable to go from the I ego to the us ego? Are we looking to grow and mature? Now, I mean, I look at this myself. I laugh because I'm like, I've got to stop trolling some of these people online, because that's definitely an I ego. But at a certain point in time, you're just like, I'm sadistically curious sometimes on how far these conversations will go. And it's kind of incredible in ways, but the thing is as well, we need to introspect. We can't project. I can write about this, like in Polymathic Being, and I think you do this as well in your writing. I can kind of hear this language in yours. You've applied this stuff to yourself. You've studied it. You are your own worst critic when it comes to the concepts that we both write about. Um, I have to do that before I can ever suggest anybody
Absolutely.
else does anything different. So wrapping it back to these midlife people, either whether it be the midlife women with the neurodivergent cluster B, or the midlife men with their guru status and how they have fitness and everything else, take a look. Have they applied it to themselves long before they apply it to others? And is it helping them grow and mature? Is it holding accountability as they go forward? And is it a I ego or is it an us ego? And that's a way to kind of look at how to filter out the stuff that's going on around you. And then as you start to read more about how the brain works, how you're doing, is to first apply all of that stuff internally. This is why one of the essays I wrote on, embrace your white belt, that humility. So insatiable curiosity to go look at these things and challenge your biases, the humility to accept I'm probably the one doing them if I don't like it, right? The person I dislike in another, the behaviors I dislike in somebody else are probably also in me. And then that, intentional reframing, like I said, to kinda look at it from the different perspective and make it happen. That's probably the best way for both with your writing and counterintelligence and what I write with mixed mental arts and the polymathic mindset. Um, that's probably the best way I can come up with to hack your brain. What are your closing thoughts on that one?
I would say to take it for viewers to a practical, because obviously the next logical question is, okay, well, how do I do this? The number one thing you need, I would argue, is healthy embarrassment. You need the capacity to be embarrassed because, and not shame. Shame
Mhm.
says I'm a mistake. Embarrassment says I made a mistake. I did a bad thing because embarrassment changes behavior. It drives that change. And if you want to get better, if you want to become more mature, if you want to do all these good things we have talked about, you have to have the capacity for healthy embarrassment.
Yep, and you plugged my own article for me, it seems, and "Laugh at Yourself" was one I published just, like, 2 weeks ago. And if you have anything you wanna drop on your stuff, feel free to drop any links you want in the chat, but, yes, you have to that healthy embarrassment, the ability to laugh at yourself, and it might start with this, like, "Oh," that's the healthy embarrassment, and then you can get to the, okay, and then pretty soon, a few weeks later, you're like, "Oh my god, dude, did you see it?" You go, "Oh, yeah, you were such a turd back then." You're like, "Yeah, yeah, I was," right? And you could actually go from that rueful to that, kind of you look back, you're like, "Holy shit, I am not where I ever was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person," right?
I
And,
would argue that, yeah, you should be able to look back every 5 years and say, "God, I was not great 5 years ago."
yeah,
You should be
uh,
embarrassed every 5 years.
100%. And oh, dude, the number of times, like, I have that visceral reaction sometimes where I'm like, Um, I'm like, "Oh, it makes me cringe."
I've
So
been on Substack for 5 years, and sometimes I look back at, like, my first couple articles and go, "Oh, God, I hope nobody's still reading this." But I leave it up because that's
mhm.
value.
Yeah, there's the 100% the value in that in that maturation, and also the value in the going back to accountability, acknowledging that maturation. This is just something like, this idea that you dig into my tweets from when I was in college and you're going to, uncover something. That's not me. I could absolutely tell you, you know, that was 20 years ago. I'm not in any way, shape, or form that person, or I mean, not so fundamentally different, but I can be embarrassed about it. I would never say it again or whatever, right? But so there's the accountability, but then there's also that forgiveness for that growth, right? You don't have to be burdened to who you were. You can start to trim some of those identity labels and find out which ones are critical and which ones aren't. And stop having those identity protector systems. And that's one way that you have the most flexibility in the ability to hack your brain. We'll just put it this way. You can't hack your brain if you're not willing to actually start trimming off different things and challenge your own stuff.
I just realized something that I think, one of us should probably write an article on when you talk about the, going back into somebody's tweets or social media or whatever and pulling something up from 15, 20 years ago and going, "See, you're this." The reason it works and the reason people buy that crap is because they haven't changed. They are still that person from 20 years ago. And that's why if somebody were to pull up some of the things, and God knows there's plenty of it out there, when I was, in resistance groups and I was very politically loud and obnoxious, and people could pull up stuff and I go, "Yeah, yeah, I said it, and," because I know I'm not that person.
Mhm.
And so it doesn't bother me. But if I was in an identity protective system, it absolutely would bother me if somebody brought up something.
No, that's I'm gonna build on that, and I think we'll cut it for today because I actually have to get back to my day job. Um, so, um, we talked about the humility, we talked about the curiosity, and we talked about the intentional reframing. Something that's important in what you just said as well is there's a concept like we like to project. So there's another article I wrote on looking into a mirror or arguing into a mirror, I think it's called. So because there's a lot of times people address me and I'm like, who do you think I am? and because you expect from others what you expect from yourself. So I look at it, I'm like, who are you looking at? Like, what do you oh, I'm seeing you as if you were in my position. So that's healthy to understand as well because people do like to project their inadequacies. So you get somebody who's cluster B, you get somebody who's got these negative pathologies. They can't imagine somebody else isn't like that. They just can't imagine somebody else isn't manipulating. They can't imagine like the number of times at work where they're like, oh, you must be doing this for some political reason. I'm like, I hadn't even thought about that. Like, sorry, in my own ignorance or naivety, I didn't, but it tells me more about you than it does an inclination for me. Now, what I wanna do in leaving this as we go is the incredible importance of recognizing that you also project, and a lot of times what you're railing against is what you see in yourself, because you are expecting from others what you expect from yourself. So before you sit down, you're like, you know this person, right? If you haven't studied how that person is actually you, and what you don't like is actually you. That's incredibly important to be able to do here. And what I think that does, and I see you've just dropped a couple links in here. What that does is actually hit both of those. It starts to challenge your own identity protective systems, and it starts to highlight your own blind spots. Which I've learned a lot from your writing, and I really appreciate that because it gives a different credibility from the counterintelligence world to the stuff that I've seen, but also challenges me as well because you've got some really great writing out there for what can be applied to me internally.
Oh, thank you. I like reading your stuff. It's fun. It's, you get kinda wild.
I try to keep it spicy.
It is definitely spicy, ghost pepper spicy. But yeah, thank you for doing this. It's about time. I know I've been bugging you for quite some time to get on here. We should do it again now that we've uncovered all these other nuggets that I need to think on. I think those are the best conversations are not the ones where we come and we say, "Oh, I think this. Well, I think this. Okay, that's nice. Let's go on about our day." But something that I can take away and go, "Oh, now let me think on that and
Mhm.
make something more of it." So
It's, I like to say that, forming, unforming, and reforming ideas, kind of wrangling. That's the concept of mixed mental arts, right? Grappling with complex ideas in the octagon of life. And it goes into another mantra, the from Alvin Toffler: the illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who can't read or write, but will be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And let me just wrap that as probably you've got a lot of little adages here, but that learning, unlearning, and relearning is probably the best way to go hack your brain. So thank you everybody who's here. I'm
thanks,
not
all.
sure if this actually, if this is a saved one and it'll be up for later. I guess we'll find out when we end it. But we'll try to do these more often. Thank you, everybody.
See you guys later.